What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna work on Project Blueberry a little bit. Now, if you guys have seen the last video, we installed the K20A2 into the engine bay with the all-wheel drive transmission and the twin disc. I also attached a lot of the accessories to the engine as well, just to get it on there and ready to rock and roll. Now, before I continue with the car, I need something off of Blueberry that I'm gonna be using on the engine, and I do have a replacement for it, which is that box right there. So right now, let's go ahead and grab Blueberry's keys and move it not to the driveway, but on the side of the driveway, so we can work on it right here. Not gonna get the car too hot since we are gonna be working in the engine bay. Like butter. E85 cold start. So I decided to park the car on the driveway instead, so I can work on concrete instead of dirt and mud. So today we're gonna pull off the engine harness. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, why am I pulling the engine harness out of Project Blueberry? A couple of reasons. One, when I built this car, I didn't have a harness yet, so I used what I had, which was saved for a later project, and the later project was the EF sedan. So because I didn't have the sedan here yet, Project Blueberry was already commencing about 9-10 months ago. I decided to use the Type S harness in that car, and now that we have the sedan here on the driveway, I kind of need it back. So I'm going to be pulling off the engine harness to replace one that I got from eBay. Now, hear me out. Typically, there's certain things that I don't use from eBay, and electronics is kind of like one of them. When it comes to wiring harnesses, conversion harnesses, engine harnesses, I go with more brand name stuff, and my go-to guy is CJSWIRING, Carlos, but unfortunately he passed away a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very saddened by the news. I think I've mentioned this before, and I'm actually set to find CJ's K-Series harness for the EF sedan build. All of my current cars uses his harness, and I would like to stay supporting his company. So just for the time being, I'm going to use the stock harness in the sedan, and I decided to opt for the eBay one for Project Blueberry. I've talked to the homies. They said this harness runs perfectly. Once in a blue while, the harness will come with like a mispinned wire in like certain sensors. So with the Type S harness, I'm gonna like check continuity and compare this harness before I install it into the car. So this right here was like 70 bucks off of eBay, and it's a little sketch. I ain't gonna lie to you guys, but again, getting some feedback from some friends, and also some of the cars out in Florida are also running these harnesses, and they don't have any issues. So I figured, you know what, let's just clean up the engine bay of Project Blueberry a little bit more with this harness and see how well it works. Cut away from yourself, not towards yourself. Now, I will say one thing. These yellow labels are really tacky to the harnesses. They're huge, and like they are freaking large, just so you can't miss what these plugs are for. So map sensor, extra wires. Oh, that's cool. They have extra wirings in here. So this right here is just the engine harness itself, and you need a conversion harness for when you run a K series into like a chassis that didn't come with a K swap. And eBay also has the conversion harnesses for like anywhere between 30 to 80 bucks. I didn't buy one because I already have a CJS K20 conversion harness in Project Blueberry, so I'm hoping that everything should just plug up no problem. C101 plugs, the ECU plugs, and yeah, let's go ahead and start taking off the Type S harness from Project Blueberry. B-series map sensor and B-series TPS sensor. gonna be a little hard to get to the speed sensor because it is in the rear. At the ECU, we need to pull off this plug, and this one has a broken clip. 2 ECU plugs, and then we have a C101, and I do have a data logging wire, so I gotta disconnect that. This right here is the stock RSX Type S harness, which is funny because this is the harness that came with this engine when I pulled it from the junkyard, and this thing is super duper long. But yeah, this is what I want to use for this car. I am going to relume all of this to make it look a little bit more cleaner. And again, stock OEM factory Type S harness for now until I find and source a CJSWIRING K-swap harness for this car. But I just want the OEM stuff for this car, and you know, we'll rock this one for Blueberry. So this right here is the aftermarket harness. This is also long too, I guess. I mean, not entirely sure why, but holy cow, that thing is about 10 feet long. So anyways, yeah, well, you get what you paid for, right? Yeah, anyways, so my friend told me that in one of his harness he found a coil pack power wire was in the wrong spot, and it was mixed up with the crank sensor, which is this guy here. So I'm gonna check continuity with this wire to see where it goes on the C101 plug, as well as the coil pack power, and just compare it to this guy here to make sure that they are in the same spot. But he told me that everything else has no issues with the amount of harnesses that he runs from eBay. So let's go through this real quick. All right, so I have you guys inside my sweater, and I want to show you my findings. So I was checking the crank sensor right here down low on the OEM harness. This is for a K20 style crank sensor, and over here on the eBay harness, these wires are terminated in the correct location on the ECU plug and the C101, and that also tells me that this eBay harness is configured for a K20 crank sensor. So if you're running these eBay harnesses, K20 crank sensor, K24 has a different pin out which you can repin and depin, but right off the rip, K20 crank sensor. So the other concern was the coil pack wires. So right here in cylinder number 1, coil pack wire OEM harness is black, white, black, and yellow, green. So these 3 wires right here, I made sure I checked continuity to know where they are headed over here on the ECU plug, and then I went over to check on the eBay harness, and it turns out that the green is going to the correct spot, the black is going to the correct spot, but the white one right here is supposedly the 12 volt to the coil pack from the key on, and this one is going to the wrong slot. So on the OEM harness, that black white wire goes to the C101 plug facing the backside here, bottom row, far end. Right here you can see it is the black white stripe, right? But over here, same plug, C101, bottom side, backside, this white plug right here is where it's supposed to be going to. But when you check it, doesn't have continuity. What I ended up finding out was it is on a different slot, which is the top row. Slot number 7 is also a white wire, and we have continuity. So I checked the slot number 7 on the OEM harness. It is a green wire, which on Google it says like fan switch wire or fan signal or something like that, and it seems like it's terminated in the harness because I've checked every single one of these pins and it doesn't have continuity to it. I've also was told that the RSX has the fan switch on the radiator, so the plug to the fan switch is actually on the chassis harness, so it's not actually going to show through the engine harness. So all I have to do is swap this white wire with the one right here on the top that it is probing to, and we should be good. We should be good. As long as it's the same here as it is on the OEM harness, the car should fire over. Shout out to the homie Miller for the information. He ran plenty of these harnesses, and he says that most of the other wires and plugs are Gucci potatoes. It's just the coil pack wire is the main concern, because that's the only issues he's ever ran into. So I'm gonna swap the wires now. They have the same terminal, so all I got to do is unclip it and move it over, and then we'll get this back into the car. Pull this one out, switch it over. All right, close the clips, check continuity one more time. Coil pack, C101, bottom, far right. Yes, sir. Crazy how fast we lose the daylight, man. It's literally like 4 o'clock and sun's already disappearing. But we took the yellow labels off the harness because it was just way too tacky for me. And before I did that, I did take my soldering iron right there to etch pretty much all of the labels into the plug itself, just so I know where they all go, although I know where they all go. So I also forgot that B series TPS and map, so I had to wire that in, and map sensor right here is all done. So now we can get this into the car, and I hope you guys can see a little bit of it with my Harbor Freight flashlight. Quick little update with the engine bay, guys. The harness is fully installed. We got the battery tray, the battery all put back in, and the harness is snaked all the way through, and everything is plugged up accordingly. This harness right here can go underneath the water pipe to make it more tucked and out of the way, but it was kind of hard to put my hand in between all that with the turbo and everything in the way. What I also had to do was I had to modify the factory RSX charge harness, which you can see is right here, OEM, and I had to take out the alternator plug, the starter plug, and the knock sensor wire plug from the charge harness loom, just so we can use it for the OEM harness that we're going to be using for this car. So right here, this is the junction plug, the knock sensor, which I don't really run anyway, so there's no plug to that, alternator, and the starter is right there. So we'll save that for when we modify the harness for the sedan, but everything else is cleaned up, kind of zip tied and tucked out of the way. And the last thing I need to do is plug up the ECU. So we have the C101 plug clipped in, and then engine harness to ECU. I also need a wire in the data logging wire for the wideband sensor. And we should be ready to fire it. Alrighty, so hopefully that little fix we did at the C101 plug on the hood of the sedan makes this whole entire harness worth the purchase. Okay, I gotta check engine light for something. So I hooked up the laptop, and I have a check engine light for P1361 TDC sensor intermittent signal interruption. I always get confused with these sensors on the side of the head. I'm gonna flip it around to see if maybe that'll fix it. Online is always like intake cam and exhaust cam, but not TDC or CPS. So I just switched it over. TDC is on the intake side, CPS or okay. We don't have any check engine lights, and it is holding idle, so that's good. Clear. So I cleared the check engine light, and I'm gonna let it warm up and see if it'll hold, and we'll go drive it around. So far, everything seems normal. Propane gas finally died. I need to get that thing refilled because it is freaking cold out here. But regardless, we have the RS6 Type S harness reloomed with new electrical tape, feeling brand newish, and we also have the sub harness for the starter and the alternator loomed together as well. That goes right here. We disconnected it from the charge harness, which is still in Project Blueberry, so that means for this car I'm gonna have to build a new one when I get material. Alternator to the battery and the starter to the fuse box. So this thing is ready to install, and that's what I want to do right now. So let's get this into the car. So we have the intake manifold temporarily on right now, and I'm gonna put this on entirely once we figure out all the thermostat housing and the hoses back here. But for right now, just to mock it up and route all of the harnesses into place, just to kind of see how much slack we have. And because this is an OEM harness, there's a bunch of slack everywhere. So the alternator and starter sub harness right here is super duper long. So you can see I zipped it. I could have shortened it down, but I don't want to, like, you know, cut and solder and all that. I don't have any more pins to like repin this. Instead of running like wire solder to a wire to make it shorter to reuse this pin, I would have just repinned it, but I don't have any pin to do that. So I just zipped it out of the way just to keep it short, and starters in place. This is the harness itself. Right here is the injector harness, goes up into the AEM fuel rail, which then, you know, has their own slots for each of the injectors. But this may change. I might change this fuel rail later, but for right now we're gonna rock with it. Outer air control valve, we're not using that. This is the map sensor for the B series, which is underneath right here. So that's gonna go right there. Typically the cast B series starter body I run, the map sensor is on top, which is why this is long, because it loops around like this and then it goes in right there. But because this one is permanently to the RBC manifold, the map sensor is on the bottom, which makes this harness super long. So I'm gonna have to loop that. The harness together with the TPS sensor and the IAT is also long itself, so you can see it is zip tied right there. These are the K series TPS and map, so that's just going to be open. IAT sensor, TPS is already on here. Going around the back, we're going to tuck this up once everything is permanent, and then you know, we'll zip tie everything. But for right now it's just loosely hanging, but definitely looks a lot better than the plastic that comes on the harness part right here. If you guys have seen an OEM K series harness, there's this giant plastic that sits here that bolts up to like the side of the head. I took that off to make it a little more sleeker and looking fresh with the loom. So we have the reverse switch. We're not running 6-speed, so the reverse lockout is not going anywhere. VSS in the back, intake cam sensor, ECT sensor at the bottom right here, coil packs all installed. Coming to the back over here, we have VTEC pressure switch, VTC, and crank down low. We're not running the oil pressure right now because there is no damn plug to it, and I might have to terminate this later. But harness is also routed into the car. You can see goes around, super duper long, goes into the firewall grommet here, which then goes to the passenger foot area, and again, super duper long. So that's awesome. And like I mentioned, once I find the gauge wires for the alternator and the starter, we'll build the charge harness. I think I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. Normally I'd run it on the passenger side through here, goes around, and then it goes down, but I'm going to keep it with the harness, so I'm going to loop it all the way around that way as well too, so there's not a lot of like wire coming from the passenger and the driver. I'd rather just keep it all on one side. So when I get the material, we'll build that, and also ground cables. Probably gonna I might end up ordering ground cables. I'm not sure yet, but if I have enough gauge wires, I might make it myself. Who knows? eBay tucked harness for Project Blueberry works 100%. You guys saw we drove it around. I hit boost a couple of times and everything seems to be working in perfect order. And then we have the Type S harness now reloomed to put into the EF sedan just to hold me off until I find a CJS harness. But for right now, we're gonna rock with that. So if you guys are trying to run the same style harness like we did in today's video, I hope you guys find this video helpful, and I hope you guys also take that precautionary step to ensure these harnesses are good before you install into your car. Don't get me wrong though, I still stand behind companies who make tuck harnesses. My preference, CJSWIRING, I mentioned that he did pass away, so I can't get his harnesses anymore, but I've always ran Rywire before. So if you guys want something that you know is going to work, Rywire, and there are plenty of other dudes out there who make these harnesses that are reputable. So if you guys want to stay away from this, by all means. I did get another package from the mail, and this is the last bushing I need to put my sway bar onto the subframe. I've shown you guys that we got this one, which is the bushing that goes from the sway bar to the subframe itself, and then this one right here is the end links from the sway bar to the LCA. And this package came in today. This one is from Bull Boost Performance. This is part of the thermostat stuff that I got to figure out before we can put the intake manifold on. So hopefully we'll get going with this soon. But I am going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up. And if you guys want to stick around for more progress update on this car and possibly some junkyard videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. Driving Project Blueberry for the last time. Out of the block is that way.